Gotta laugh. I watched a thing today. Ross Douthat of the New York Times talking to Chris Murphy, who's a senator from Connecticut, and they were talking about society. And Douthat comes up with an old story about how it's the failure. Murphy will say, well, there's the failure of social institutions in the culture that produces so many problems in the world. And so he says, well, it's the unions being minimized, and of course they all come back to the bloody church. And I know that the church religions are not big on history. They don't seem to have much, unless it's fantastical history. But I think and this connects up to the whole education system, is that religion has failed. It has failed. It failed slowly throughout the 20th century. It failed to answer many of the questions that would occur because you enabled a large number of people to read. That's basically a late 19th, early 20th century project to allow, to move creepingly slow towards challenging the very foundation of Western civilization, which is the notion of inequality. That there are better people and lesser people. There are people with more talent, more intelligence, and all the rest of it, and they should. Well, I was watching Andor last night, and there's a scene where this woman has to make a big speech, and she goes and she makes this big speech, big revolutionary speech, and she goes into this extraordinary building, and it's got lots and lots of these sort of little round modules in each of which one person stands, and she is a senator, and she's coming to speak to all of these other people live, and then presumably it's broadcast to the plebs outside who are not there to have any. But that's the model of what we think our democracy is this elite that gets together and discusses stuff, and on the historical evidence, they are miserable failures. Get used to it. Religion has failed. To go back to it as a socially functioning institution, like the heroin it is, requires higher doses, i.e., extremism. And then, Murphy drones on, you learned to care about your neighbors. Do we really think that before Jehovah, people hated their neighbors? Do we? For 200,000 or 400,000 years, depending on what science decides is the beginning of the time we stood up on two legs and started walking around, got big brains and opposable thumbs. Come on, people. On it goes. You need institutions to care about your neighbors. Do you? Guys, this is ridiculous. If you are a godder, that's fine. It weakens character, but it's your character and your choice to weaken it. Quote, God is disappointed in them, Douthat says. Infantilization 101. Mandates for communities. Mandates by any other name are anti-democratic. Quote, the God of Abraham commands that you love your neighbor. A command is totalitarian. Mandate and command combined with Douthat's inability to think. I mean, it's staggering. It's staggering. And then I get this Christopher Rufo, who's pals with what's his name down in Florida, governor of Florida, talking about how we've got to get into the educational institutions and stop them with their liberalism. and I have to tell you, my encounters with people of the university, there's nothing could be further from the truth than their liberalism. They are dogmatic. And maybe, you find that it's maybe left-wing dogma, I don't know. But I don't find them to be free thinkers, for instance. But it's the premise, the idea. And he starts quoting the wretched Thomas Jefferson, who did feel that apparently education needed to be controlled by the legislative branch of government. And when it got out of hand, obviously, when it stopped producing dedicated citizens of the new United States, then it needed to be changed. The curriculum would need to be changed and stuff like that, which means you're talking about an indoctrination system, right? And it's very clear that Western civilization has depended on pretty intense indoctrination for the 15, 2,000, 3,000, I don't care how many odd years it's been doing its deeds on earth. And that it still comes back, and there's a relationship between education and our particular religions, which basically say that if you're not educated, i.e. indoctrinated, i.e. go to church, you are naturally wrong. You will naturally be stupid, and you will go off in the wrong directions, and you will sin. In other words, the human being is a creature that needs firm discipline. If we use the metaphor of the great animals that we know, the dog, the horse, whatever, the animals that we know, and we think that we turn the animals that we know into pit bulls or lapdogs. In other words, we condition them, we indoctrinate them in certain ways that serve us. And that is how our society looks at religion and at education. And I'm not so concerned about religion because the evidence is piling up and it's going to eradicate itself. It doesn't need any help from me. But its offspring, the education system, really needs to be allowed to be what it is. It allows, and it's a check. You're big on checks and balances, aren't you? You talk about that all the time. It's a check on society. It will continue to produce citizens who ask questions. Unfortunately, it doesn't. It doesn't. And if you want to complain about left-wing professors, that's fine. Like I say, I don't find any of them to be left-wing by my definition. Go ahead and complain about it. They're dogmatic, they're egotistical, they're whatever it is that they are. I didn't encounter any of those, but then I only went to high school. There were none of those people in high school. None of those teachers in high school. They took me on, precocious as I was, and they argued with me, but they were not pushing anything on me. And if that's what's happening in university, indeed, if that is what is happening in high school today, God help you all. But that the political predisposition of those teachers is not the problem. I'm sure I was taught by some staunch Republicans in high school, and I loved them. They were fine, delightful men and women. One of the things that we need to do, we really, really need to do this, and we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth as evidence of the decrepitude and utter failure of Western civilization, is right there in Gaza, and it's right there in climate change. Neither of which are we dealing with in any functional way. And throwing ourselves back again on the heroin that is religion, throwing ourselves back on ideology and all this sort of stuff is just killing us. Ciao.